I'm Theo.
And I'm Juliet.
And this is Apologies Accepted.
We offer an entertaining look at some of the big issues in history by examining public apologies of the famous and infamous.
We're looking at politicians, serial killers, actors, and you.
Send us a public apology you would like to make, and we'll read it on the air and give you a chance to redeem yourself or just get some guilt off your shoulders.
We're here for you. Once a week, maybe more if you're really, really sorry. Hey, everybody.
This is Apologies Accepted, the podcast. And I'm not Theo.
And I'm not Juliet.
Yay, I am. And welcome. Today we're going to talk about an apology made by everybody's favorite podcast, My Favorite Murder.
My favorite murder and my favorite podcast. Aside from ours. Ours is legit for real my favorite.
I've had to correct you on that.
But
yeah, okay, that's
I have
fine.
a note here that says,
it's my favorite podcast.
This is my favorite podcast.
I wouldn't say that MFM is my favorite podcast. I'm not sure what is, though. So it's up there. It's one I certainly listen to every week. And it is a comedy podcast, as everyone listening probably knows. It was started in January 2016 by Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff. As of 2020, it was getting 35 million downloads per month and earned $15 million in advertising revenue.
Oh, are you kidding?
I'm not kidding.
I guess why would you get on the air and lie? But 35 million
downloads per month. So they don't have 35 million listeners. They have like 450,000 listeners or something like
who just listen
episode.
Repeatedly again and again.
I don't know. I don't get it. I guess people listen to back episodes or something. I don't know. But Karen said about the podcast in a Forbes article from last year, 2020, it's nice to listen and process terrible things together. There's something really cathartic about that. But I forgot to ask you how you are, Theo.
Speaking
I think it's
of
never too
terrible
late to
things
ask.
that are cathartic. It's never too late to ask.
It's never too late to ask how you're doing. How is your week?
My week has been great. My week has been fine. Sorry, everybody, we pulled you into the show, and now we are going to stop to talk about ourselves.
Whatever.
We'll
if you don't
short.
like it, you don't have to listen, as My Favorite Murder would say.
So, yeah, good. We're moving and the market's high. Why not? Things are a little up in the air with James' office. They're going to do a hybrid, like virtual / bricks and mortar thing. And so it's kind of the world is the business world is sort of reinventing itself in parts and pieces.
Yeah.
And so let's take advantage of all of these things.
Is James going to be hybrid, or is he going to have to work in the office all the time?
So he's going to be hybrid, but he'll be working in the office for the next year. And then we're just kind of like, you know what? Let's do it. We've been through the pandemic. We've been through the snowpocalypse that brought Texas to its knees. There's been enough, all of this nonsense. So let's just move where we want to move, and we'll just make it work. Right. And so he'll, whatever, because that's the interesting thing, but it doesn't happen for another year. So we're going to sell and then just rent because you can't buy anything, and take about a year. So we had a stager come through the house to help, just sort of new, fresh eyes, right?
Yeah.
Let's pull out the junk, because I love thrift stores, and I cannot walk into one without walking out with something. Right.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool too. And so did the designer / stager. And and so I have a lot of shit I have to haul out and stick in the garage. And
there's
a whole, but it's weird because it's not weird, but it's interesting because it's like, oh, your home tells a story and people buy stories. And I'm like, okay, I watch a lot of HGTV. That all makes sense to me. And so she's like, the reason we stage isn't so much to depersonalize. It's that when you have a lot of things, people end up shopping your home, and they'll say, oh, I love those chairs with that, display cabinet that was in that house, but they don't think about the house. So she's like, really what you need to do is showcase potential. So
I see.
Remove as much as you can. And if it's smaller than a football, it goes in a box and it just goes away.
Wow.
But
That's funny because I thought the stager was going to say it's perfect the way it is. You don't have to do a thing.
well, I was very, very excited and pleased when she opened up our pantry and said, "Wow, do you watch a lot of Marie Kondo?" And I was like,
Do you?
I know who she, no, I'm the product of an uptight Swedish French farm girl. We are just fucking organized. Get your shit
Wow.
together and get it up onto a shelf. So yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so anyway,
Impressive.
that's my week, getting mentally prepared to get rid of all of my favorite things. And I learned a lot from the designer. She was awesome. I can now talk about negative space, and I get this whole like stripping a house down, not so much
Yeah.
to show people what you have, but more, oh, you know what? That great big wall just needs a piece of art on it.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have the perfect piece of art to hang on this wall in our future home.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And so we'll see.
Every time I look at a house that I end up buying, I'm always like, I want to buy all the furniture that you staged it with. Can we please buy the furniture and it just ditch everything that we already have? But it never works out for some reason. I guess because they're leasing it.
I'm hoping that happens. I'm hoping somebody's like, everything is precious and I will give you so much more money if I can have everything. Cause, you know, there's so many things here that I just don't need. It's
Yeah,
sad.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I've got more stuff than I could probably furnish 10 homes with the stuff in my house.
Oh, we could easily, I mean, this is no brag. This is what I'm ashamed of, right? We could easily outfit a second home and never notice what was missing. I mean, as we speak, I'm sitting on 2 chairs at the same time.
It is a nice chair, though. I envy that chair, and I wish that I had a place for it in my house.
I wish I was that chair.
I wish I were that chair.
I envy that chair.
Not that way.
Oh, if only people could sit on me, I would be so comfortable. I would make everyone so happy. I'd be such a great chair. I'd be better than that chair. Oh, God, we just went back to high school. So anyway, yes, that's my week. And your week?
Oh, nothing. A whole lot of nothing. Crap at work for a change. It's going to work itself out, I'm sure. It's been cold here. It's been in the 50s. I think it's 50 something right now. I'm not complaining though, because it's been sunny too. Right now it's beautiful out there, and I'm getting my haircut this afternoon. So hooray. Finally, after at least 8 months, I'm getting a haircut. My dog is whining. I'm sorry about that. She wants to come out and talk to us.
Just want you to lose your precious locks.
Yeah. So that's my week. It's been very unexciting, unfortunately. Not much to talk about.
Unexciting is exciting. I am sorry. You give me the most boring week in the world. And that is amazing and awesome, because it's a privilege to be bored.
That's the truth, especially these days.
Yeah. I mean, being excited.
Yeah.
Uncle Fred was thrown in jail again and he doesn't have any bail money and you got to go out and get a job to get, that's not fun.
Or even I've got to pack all my shit to get ready to move. That's not fun.
Oh, I was like, God, I feel sorry for that. Oh, that's me.
You've blocked it out already.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh.
But yeah,
right.
So ready? Here's the segue. Let's move.
Shall we go back?
Let's move back.
To the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. So as I said, MFM comedy podcast, $700 billion a minute. It's cathartic and people like to process things together. Okay, fine. So in episode 92 of My Favorite Murders, the Halloween special from October 2008, a story was submitted by a family member of a police officer talking about a medical legal death investigator who was attacked and raped in an office storage room near a morgue by someone who obviously knew her schedule. No arrest in the case was ever made, and the victim later said that, quote, the detectives investigating my case forgot to flag it as confidential, resulting in an unknown number of deputies reading details of my case. And of course, as I said, that's how the story made it to My Favorite Murder as a hometown. Karen and Georgia read an email from a relative of the police officer involved in the case.
Yeah. And for those people who are unfamiliar with the show, although I think everybody is familiar with My Favorite Murder. If you're listening to us, you will love them.
You know My Favorite Murder.
And you'll know My Favorite Murder. But just for our listeners who don't, My Favorite Murder does an hour-long episode where there's 2 co-hosts and they each tell each other a horror story about murder, true crime. And they relieve their anxiety through jokes, and it's very funny. And I love the show. They do an episode once a week that is shorter. That's called a minisode, where people write in letters about murders. And it's gotten bigger than just murders, but initially it started off for the first few years. It was just murders in my hometown, right? Because everybody's got a thing that happened in their hometown that they just love to share at parties, and oh my God, you won't believe what happened. So that's what this is. Somebody wrote into the show about an event that happened in their small town, and the host read it on the air, as they've been doing for years and years and years.
Yep. And the woman who was attacked was apparently a listener. She heard her own story on My Favorite Murder and wrote to them. So she had some trouble getting in touch with them, but Karen and Georgia finally did get her letter, and they read it on I think it's minisode 211. Is it minisode 211?
It's 211, yeah.
Yeah. And the author said in her email, I actually wrote to you once before and indicated that I didn't want anything more published, that I just wanted to set the record straight. But I've had a few months to sit on this and some time to bounce it off my therapist, and I've decided that I do want to tell my story. It was so crazy to hear my worst nightmare told on a podcast. It felt like a violation. So much of this has felt like something that happened to me, and I want to control this part of the narrative. I want my real story told by me with my consent. And then she goes on in the episode to tell her story, which, Karen and Georgia read her story on minisode 211. And then they say, and here's their apology, unless you have something to add before I get to the apology.
Nope.
Okay. They say, so we told a story that was third hand and not the person's story to tell. I don't think that the person who wrote in had malicious intent, but I think this is a very good lesson for all of us when we think about what we're doing and how we're talking and who we're talking about. So our apologies to you who had to hear her story on a podcast. That's the last thing that we want to happen. And that's just not what we're trying to do and not what it's about. And we should have thought it through. And we're going to try our best to keep aware of this and to keep you in mind so that we avoid mistakes like this in the future. And so Georgia and I have decided that we're going to donate $10,000 to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. So that was their apology. They removed the original story in episode 92 with the reading of the email. And they put Karen's comments in the reading where the original story used to be. They didn't add any extra comments talking about why they removed it or anything. I think it's as another Redditor said, it's a straight cut and paste job. So a couple of points that I have about this whole thing. So the victim was a listener to My Favorite Murder, which means, as my friend Michelle pointed out, that she was okay hearing other people's stories.
Oh, interesting point.
It doesn't mean she didn't have a right to tell her own story, but it raised the question for me, why do we listen to true crime podcasts and watch TV shows of this kind? Why was the victim listening? And why was it okay for her to tell, why was it okay to her for Karen and Georgia to tell other people's stories, but not hers?
Wow. All right. Well, I don't have an answer for that, but I can give you sort of like human people in general, right? Mm-hmm. This true crime stuff, horror stories in general. I was talking with a friend who does not listen to My Favorite Murder. There are some people in the world who don't, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of his first question was, why would anybody listen to this? Right. And it's that idea of gathering around the campfire, right? And telling each other ghost stories or whatever. And so it does have that feel to it. This, it's about entertainment. And so in a way, when something is entertainment, we're used to actors and actresses and puppets and cartoon drawings, right? It's one step away from reality, right?
Okay.
And so I'm going to say depersonalized / I don't want to say dehumanized, but we're taking the individual human out of it. And what we're hearing is a story that happened.
Right.
To pick on my favorite Cinderella, maybe there was some poor girl who was scrubbing floors all the time and a prince did marry her, and right. And maybe she's like, I wish everybody would shut up about my fucking shoes.
So, Andrea denoted.
I love how you're like, So anyway.
Did you have more to say?
About Cinderella's shoes? No, she's tired of it. No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. In the New Republic, Andrea Denhote agrees with you and says, a central tenet of my favorite murder fandom is that talking about murders is a way to neutralize the anxieties provoked by those very crimes. And as time has gone on, the show has increasingly leaned into themes of mental health and self-care. In the podcast's very early days, the host suggested that people needed to hear murder stories because it might help them to stay on alert and avoid getting murdered themselves. But that always felt like the half-baked idea. And anyway, they mostly abandoned it when listeners pointed out that it smacked of victim blaming. Now they focus on the mutual support that murderinos find just by admitting their anxieties and acknowledging the dangers they face as women in the world. Yeah. So that's sort of what you were saying.
And I'm going to say, like, that's one of the great things that grew out of this podcast that can't be replicated, right?
Yeah.
That was just so organic. To think that this show literally started off with two friends from the same social circle. They weren't like best buddies, right? They met at a party. All listeners know this, right? They met at a party, overlapping social circles. One of them, I think it was Karen, was talking about the car crash that happened at Austin City Limits. And she
South
was
by Southwest.
Oh, was it South by? So see how Austin I am? I call it South by. Right. I set that up.
Of course.
And she was in line to go see a band perform inside a club. And she got out of the end of the line because the line was long. And that's where the car hit. So she missed getting struck by that car because she didn't have the patience to wait in a long line. Right.
Yeah.
And she's telling that story at a party and everybody's kind of like, not comfortable with it. But Georgia went running over and saying, oh my God, you saw that car crash. You have to tell me everything about it. And so then they got
Which
together.
Which would have weirded me out personally, but Karen was all for it, I guess.
Oh, I would have been, if I'm telling a story and somebody says, tell me more. Hi, you have,
love it.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's better than money. So anyway, so they discovered they both liked true crime and they were both embarrassed about their passion, obsession, interest in true crime. They used all of his words.
Yeah.
And so they had a coffee date. Like, let's try and be friends. Let's see what happens. And they ended up talking for 5 hours. And during that conversation, that's when the idea of, oh my God, if we can do this for 5 hours, we need to have a podcast. Right.
Wow.
And cool. And so it started off with them at the dining room table in a 1-bedroom apartment. And it was Koreatown, I think, but don't hold me to that. Right. But not a best part of LA. Right. And it's grown into hundreds of millions of, well, I guess it's not hundreds of millions. Yeah. Over a year. If they're getting 35 million downloads,
a month.
That'd be 350 million in 10 months.
Plus.
And then plus another 70 million, 497.3 million.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
I got an A in math. Thank you, community college.
Anyway, it's a lot of people.
I sidetracked you, but yeah, I mean, the listening audience just connected with each other in ways that you couldn't manufacture.
And it's largely women. It's like, I don't know what % women, but when I went to the live show in San Francisco so many years ago, it was 98% women.
I have no doubt. I've heard the screams in the audience, and it's the rare baritone that you will hear. Yeah.
My husband was there, but just because I made him come with me. So he actually liked My Favorite Murder.
You had to drag along.
That's right. Yeah.
I have tried to get James to listen to it. I have tried to trick him. Right?
Really? Really?
Like, would you like another drink, honey? Hey, while we're sitting around, let's listen to this podcast. No. Long car drives.
That's funny.
Nope.
Wow. Does he have a favorite podcast?
No.
Oh, he doesn't listen to podcasts at all?
So he doesn't like TikTok. He doesn't like podcast. Yeah, I know. I'm like, you're not young. You're not young and hip like me.
So back to what we were talking about, though. Do you think that there are that many women who think obsessively about true crime that it's such an issue for them that they have to listen to true crime podcasts in order to relieve their anxiety?
I mean, obsessively is the word I'm kind of like, I'll say no to that if obsessively is going to be in that sentence. But if we take that out and just say, do I think that there are a lot of women out there who are nervous about living in the world because of violence? I would say yes.
Well, that's true.
Right.
Yeah,
and
that is definitely true.
And I will say this, let me explain women to you. Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
All right. So there's
who would know better than you?
Nobody.
A gay man.
I'm a man who also is gay. So yippee.
Yes.
All right. So I have a friend and she likes all those Lifetime movies. Right.
Yeah.
And her favorite thing is sitting on the couch, just watching a lot of crap TV. And she knows it's crap. Right. Yeah. And so we were talking and I was like, yeah, I try to watch the Lifetime channel and I can't, because it's just the same thing again and again and again. Right. Innocent woman is victimized by a guy. Terrible.
Yeah.
The next movie, an innocent woman is victimized by a guy. Right. Who with blonde hair. So,
right.
So no. And then she was like, oh, all right. So what dumb TV do you watch? Don't tell me the Hallmark channel, which was absolutely the channel that I would watch. And so I've discovered there's two types of women in the world. Those who like Hallmark and the romancy, I'm going to fall in love with a man. It's going to be perfect, or people fall. And then the ones that it's Lifetime, men are deceitful. They're going to murder you.
Yeah.
There's no middle ground.
I don't know anybody who's not one or the other.
Yeah. So the human condition, once again, decoded by us.
I know most women I know are the true crime people, which is interesting. I don't think I know any women who are the Hallmark people, but I know there are a lot of them because there are a lot of Hallmark type podcasts.
I know one person who's a Hallmark person, and she has a sweatshirt, which is how I knew she was a Hallmark person, because it had the Hallmark Channel sweatshirt on it.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, tell me, did you buy that?
That's a lot.
Or was it like on a park bench? Like,
did somebody force you to wear that?
How did it come into your life? Yeah. And not so much a true crime. I'm going to say probably the only person that I know that not like I walk around and talk to people. I do push my favorite murder on people. Okay. I do say, do you know what a podcast is? Have you heard my favorite murder?
Well, I'm sure they're grateful to you for the percentage of the 35 downloads a month that are
the one listener I dragged over.
So there are some issues that I have with true crime, surprisingly, or not surprisingly.
Is it the crime part?
It's the crime part. And we'll talk about, I don't know what I was just going to say, but so one of the issues I have is that kind of what you'll notice that in true crime, they tend to glorify the police and what I'll call crime officers. So, the police are always solving the crime, and there's always detectives and other people associated with the police that are doing good jobs and finding out who the killer is and blah, blah, blah. When if you've ever had your car broken into, there's not shit the police are going to do for you. Or we had our car stolen one time, and I'm sorry, the police did nothing. They did absolutely nothing.
You had your car stolen?
Oh, Brent did. It was his car. It was a long time ago.
Where did you put it?
Where did we put it? On the street.
No, I meant where did you put it when you stole it? But it came out stupid. What did you do with it? That would have been better.
Steal Brent's car. So studies have shown that consuming a lot of crime-related media is correlated with both an increased fear of crime and a higher degree of trust in the competence and good intention of cops. So interestingly, if you watch a lot of crime TV or crime podcasts or whatever, your fear of crime does not decrease. It increases. So if you're watching it to be cathartic, it may not be doing the job for you, but you will have a higher degree of trust in the competence and good intention of the police and the police associated, which is not, as we have seen over the past few years, necessarily warranted.
Isn't that interesting? Because I buy into the whole, what do they call it with a forest fire when you do a counter burn?
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a name
Whatever
for
it's
that.
called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember it, but okay, whatever. So I do buy into that. Like, I'm deathly afraid of tarantulas, but I know if you
Uh-huh.
let a bunch of them crawl over me for 15 hours, I would eventually
Oh my
get over
God.
my fear.
Yeah.
So I would be dead. But
Ah.
so there is that whole like burning the fear out. I mean, that's how parents used to teach kids how to swim. You know, I'm afraid of the water. Throw them in the deep
You just throw
end.
them in,
Right.
find out it's okay. But that's, in order for that to happen, for that to be a true analogy, you'd have to be a victim of crime and find out that it's not that bad, and then you weren't afraid of crime anymore.
Oh, wow, you're right.
Listening to podcasts about crime.
Okay, I'm going to go to bed and leave my front door wide open, everybody. Good night. Yeah, that's dumb.
Help me get over my fear. Come on in. Yeah. So that's one issue I have with true crime in general. Well, that's two issues really, that it doesn't relieve your fears of crime, according to studies anyway, and that you're going to have a higher degree of trust in people that you probably should not have a higher degree of trust in.
It allows for false hope.
False hope. And the other issue I have with true crime is that generally the portrayals of the victims of crime are inaccurate. So most homicide victims are black men, not white women.
True.
And I think that My Favorite Murder has tried to what's the word? Showcase victims of crime who are of color. I know they did a piece on Matrice Richardson.
Yes.
But I don't know what percentage it is of their
it's small.
Women are victims, are people of color. And I think it is small. And not only that, but they have done some things themselves, which are sort of white woman racism. Like they put out some merchandise that had teepees on it, and that caused a scandal. They didn't apologize, but they removed the teepee from the design, and they donated $10,000 to the First Nations Development Institute. So their response to mistakes they make seems to be to throw money at it.
Well, I think okay. So what I have discovered is not so much this impulse to play devil's advocate, but to protect people that I love. And because I love Karen and Georgia, although I will say about lots of stuff, right? Maybe it's not throw money at it as much as it is do some good in the world that they can actively do. And so, you could build an argument that it's disingenuous to donate money that's a tax write-off, so they're benefiting from it, and it's PR, et cetera. But then on the other hand,
and it's
they
only
don't
$10K.
have...
I mean, if they make $15 million a year, they can afford to give more than $10K. I'm saying.
I think there's some tax thing, right, where if you give more than $10,000, the recipient has to pay taxes on it. I don't know how that works with charities because I don't.
Well, they could donate enough to cover the taxes.
But what if the taxes are really high and you just get $10,000? No. What if that's all the money a charity can ever get?
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, me either. I don't donate that kind of money.
No, I can't. Can't afford it.
I can, but I don't. No, totally kidding. Of course not. So yeah, I see it more as like that's the good they can do outside of personally opening their homes up to people in need or going places and building homes for people.
I'm not convinced that their apology about either the clown morgue story or the teepee were something they really learned from. I think that's what I would want more than them giving $20 million to the First Nations Development Institute, although that would be nice. It would be good if they used their popularity for a more positive outcome. I don't know. What am I trying to say?
I hear what you're saying. Like they have a platform and
they still make positive comments about the death penalty, for example. Like they say things like that guy should be fried or whatever. And I have an anti-death penalty and I have a real issue with that.
And then that gets into this whole thing of like casual conversation, like, you know, what we're having. And I'm sure that, I mean, I know I've said stuff where it's like, oh my.
And I hold it against you every bit.
You're good. You should. You should remind me of it constantly. So I can see I can put those comments in context and allow for inconsistency, not only because, I like them and I want to protect them, but more like, I get it, you know, when they say, oh, he should fry, what they mean is he should be punished to a maximum extent. Maybe their stance on the death penalty might be a little squishy. Like in the moment they feel, yeah, kill him. But then would they swing the hammer? How is that a way to kill people? But apparently I've just made it one.
Would they place the injection, you're saying?
Yes,
Would they
thank
be
you.
There to
or as nurses like to say, hammer that in. I'm going to be right about that. Yeah. So I don't know. The cynic would say, oh, they're throwing money at a problem and that's the easy way out. And then fan / somebody else who believe, I guess it depends on your belief in what are they really doing as people / and entertainers, right?
Yeah.
Do they have empathy? Are they truly being empathetic? And then if they are, our answers are one way, right? And if this is money, 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 let's pretend to be all caring, then our answers fall another way.
Right. That's true. That's true to an extent. I think you still hold people responsible for the things that they say and the things that they do, regardless of what their intention is. So I could have the best intention in the world and I could use certain words and that would still be bad. I would just need to be educated. And I think that people are trying to educate that. So I'm holding them a little bit responsible. And then there's the other thing that they seem to blame things on mental health, like calling people sociopaths and psychopaths. That's a little bit more iffy to me because I understand where they're coming from with that, but perhaps that's nitpicking. But the positive comments about the death penalty really gets to me. So another thing that's unrelated to the issues with true crime that I have, or more issues with the podcast, is that their catchphrase, stay sexy, don't get murdered, annoys me. And what if you're not interested in staying sexy?
Well, okay. But
that's not the best thing in the world. It's not the only thing in the world.
And well, so being sexy can take, as you know, many different forms. And one of those ways of being sexy is to be smart, to be clever, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be about, and I'm working hard here on this, right? Because I mean, you know how the catchphrase was born. It was on the early.
I don't remember actually.
Oh, well, so once upon a time, I told you that I had listened to some episode 4 times and you were like, really? In prep for this show, our podcast? And I was like, no, just in the course of my real life, I have re-listened to the start of their show probably 5 times, like episodes 1 through 18, right? Just because there's so much there that's interesting. And so they weren't sure how to sign off when they were done. A problem that we had, still have. And so Karen sort of mockingly was like, stay sexy, what you would say in a high school yearbook.
I see.
Right? Stay sexy, have a great summer. And so that's where that came from. And then Don't Get Murdered came a couple of episodes later where Georgia just sort of threw it out because the show was wrapping up and the sign-off thing was still kind of weird. And Karen had the last word. And Georgia, I guess, sort of felt, it's just real organic. You could tell like she felt, there's a beat here and I need to grab it and hit a drum. And Don't Get Murdered. And great, you know? So I hear what you're saying, but maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people are going to be like, and there was that horrible podcast, My Favorite Murder, that everybody loved, but thank God those 2 women were executed. Because foulness like that should exist.
I also don't like the name My Favorite Murder. I mean, I get it. I don't like it. I mean, if you'd had somebody murdered that was close to you, would that annoy you a little bit?
Well, so what it does, what that title does is it sort of hits right at the heart of that unease that people have about being attracted to true crime stories, right? So how can you have a favorite murder? But what they mean is my favorite story is the story about X, Y, and Z, right?
About a murder.
Right. Well, I mean, a murder is the thing that happens in it. And that's why they're interested in it. The plot twist that they need, right? Yeah. And not just them, but everybody. But I mean, you know, again, now I am in super I was going to say Charles Darwin. I'm evolving as we speak. Clarence Darrow? Who the fuck was that defense attorney?
Was it Clarence Darrow?
I'm just being a defense attorney now. There we go.
Okay.
And I forgot what I was going to defend.
Oh dear. My favorite murder.
Other than them. Right. Okay, right. So everybody's got something that attracts them to true crime, right? In some form or fashion, some way, somehow. If we look at the fascination with serial killers, right? I can remember reading the book Zodiac when it came out.
Yeah.
And and I hate horror, right? And also a good handful of Anne Rule books. When true crime had a big hit, like
Jeffrey,
in the 80s and 90s. Right. Yeah, exactly. And there is something in that. And so I get it. I get that impulse, right? But for me, that's not every story all the time. It's not the only thing I'm interested in, right? Probably like you with horror film. Like I can't. Even commercials are scary for me. But you have an appreciation for what word do we want to use?
Art?
Genre? No. The art?
It is a genre.
No. For
It is a genre.
the slime show that horror is sure.
Yeah, but nobody actually gets killed in horror movies.
How do you know?
I think I'm pretty sure.
It could all be true.
I think that's one way of dealing with the anxiety of being a vulnerable person in the world is watching horror movies, maybe. But yeah,
I could see
perhaps it's the same.
The logic.
Maybe it's
in that.
Just that people don't recognize in their daily lives that the stories that are associated with true crime are true stories, that there are actual people behind them. It's not just a horror movie, or it's not just a story that someone's telling you. There's real people that have been hurt.
I think that is totally it. It's very easy to recognize that people are people, but then also to just sort of see them as figures in a story and just connect from there and not think about the humanity, right? But more like the abstract idea of the story. Like, this is a great story. And then it's this terrible thing that happened to a person. It
takes the place of a myth, maybe, as a cautionary tale.
Sure. And folklore does this, myths do this, urban legends do this, right? And that's kind of what my favorite murder can be. It's what it is for me. When I listen to it, I'm not listening to it because I have a lot of anxiety around crime. I mean, the answer to that is make friends with criminals. They're not going to rob you, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it's worked so far. Yikes. And then, oh God, I had this killer point I was working towards, and it just evaporated. But it's also because it's so broad, what makes story? Why are people attracted to story? Why are stories important, right? What do people get out of stories? And within this, I can see we said that like people can be misled with false hope. Like, oh, the police are always the heroes and the police will always have your best interest at heart and the police will not kill you. Right. But there is that thing of like, this thing happened to that person and that person locked a door and had an old cell phone, and you can get clues for survival, right? Out of story, right? And so I can see it functioning in that way. Like maybe it's not alleviating your anxiety really, because to your point, studies show people get more nervous about crime, not less.
Yeah.
But just more like, don't have a baseball bat under your bed. You keep Alexa
sleep with it
next to your bed. Right. Or sleep with dress it up like a man. Put it in the pillow next to you.
So I also want to talk about another thing that I object to about the podcast. And this is one of the biggest things that I think about on a daily or a weekly basis.
Daily basis?
Not a daily basis, but a weekly basis as I hear the podcast. So they are lazy. They don't even do their own research. When they did do their own research, they stole it from Wikipedia or wherever. And now they have assistants doing their own research. And I don't know what they do except tell jokes. And perhaps the jokes are the part that makes the whole thing successful. But I mean, that's really the only part that I see that really comes from them.
Well, I would say like the empathy that they exhibit. But so great point there, because for me, this whole My Favorite Murder apology, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't terribly interested in, I know the backstory. I figure everybody knows the backstory. Great. There weren't a lot of facts to find. There's some gossipy stuff, but who cares? Because it doesn't have anything to really do with the apology. But so it was this question that I had. Is it ethical to make money telling third person stories? Right. It's one thing if the actual victim who experienced the trauma writes in and shares in their own voice.
Yeah.
Read that first person account. Great, right?
That's exactly going to be my next point, that the fact that the apology that they made was even made seems to be admitting that the whole premise of the show is questionable, that Karen and Georgia are telling stories that aren't theirs to tell for a profit. And
so this gets into ethics and morality and law, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, if you still have other avenues to go down to, we'll circle back to this. Cause for me, that was the whole thing. It's like, okay, clearly legal, but is it ethical? What's the difference? Should we care? And then in looking at the apology, not only how do I rate it, like as a fan, how do I feel about it? Because it really exposed Karen's vulnerability, right? What in the show in the past has been similar. And then so there was that, but then there was also really, is it ethical to watch a documentary and that, like I've done on this show, and then come and tell people about the documentary that you watched, like I've done on this show? And I'm going to say, yes, that's very ethical.
Sure. That's public.
But it is that thing of like stealing, air quotes around stealing, other people's work. It's the lazy aspect of it.
That's different. Well, if you're talking about a documentary that you've seen in your own words, that's one thing. But if you went and recited the documentary from beginning to end, that would be another.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's called plagiarism.
That's right. And I think that what they did in the beginning was pretty close to plagiarism.
There was a lot of that. There was a lot of not citing sources. And really what it was two coworkers sitting down gossiping during the work day, right? It was a lot of office cooler sort of talk. Was how I felt about the earlier shows, right? Or maybe like pajama party kind of stuff, right? And in those instances, when you're at work, you don't say, oh, the documentary produced by the BBC, done by David Attenborough, right? You just say, this great thing about elephants. And did you know that they can fly helicopters?
But that's different, though, because they're not reading directly off of Wikipedia.
True.
So if you and I are sitting here talking about My Favorite Murder, that's one thing. But if we're stealing from their episodes and reading about a true crime story in their words and passing it off as ours, that's another thing entirely, in my opinion.
Totally, right. And that does get to ethics. And there are some legalities around that, too. And so one of the things that I would throw into this mix, right, is awareness. There's intent. Oh, we didn't have any intention of causing somebody harm. All right, cool. But then there is also just knowledge of how this industry works. And so I would point to, and I hate to do this, but I would point to Karen Kilgariff, who as a comedy TV writer is very familiar with the Department of Standards and Practices at every studio. Nothing gets on the air without going through standards and practices and legal. Every script is reviewed, right? Every word is looked at, right? And decisions are made. And for those listeners who, I'm sure everybody gets what standards and practices is, but basically in the United States, standards and practices, also referred to as broadcast standards and practices, is the name traditionally given to a department at a television network which is responsible for the moral, ethical, and legal implications of the program that network airs. Standards and practices also ensures fairness on televised game shows, yada, yada, yada. So there's a department that's like, is this ethical? Is this fair? Is this right? And Dave Chappelle tells a great story about working with standards and practices, which I will now share with you. Right?
Okay.
Did you watch any Dave Chappelle?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, you got to put that on your list.
Okay.
Some of the air is going to be let out of the tires on this because there are words that I can't say and won't say. And so that sort of makes the retelling juvenile. It's much better when he does it. So he had a weekly TV show. And in that TV show, they would say N-word this and N-word that, and you N-word, and mom an N-word, and this N-word, and that N-word, and N-word every 5 minutes, right? Because that was the show.
Mm-hmm.
And standards and practices would basically see him every week and talk to him about loads of things in the show, but the N-word was allowed, right? Fine, no problem. So he wrote a joke, he wrote a short skit, and he used the F word, the gay slur for a gay man, right? Hard T at the end. And the woman from Standards and Practices, who he liked, and he saw every week because there was always something alarming in the script that we can't do this. You're going to have to soften this. There's always something going on, right? He's trying to be real edgy. And she was like, you can't use this word. And she whispered the word to him, right? And it's in her office and they're meeting. They've had a nice chat. And then they get to the point of the meeting. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll figure something else out. And he gets up to leave and he turns around and he says, why can't I say that word? And she said, well, Dave, with all due respect, you're not gay. And he said, I'm not an N-word either.
Wow.
Right? And so that's what standards and practices does. And it's very subjective, right? We don't want to get sued and we don't want to offend anybody. It's about money. So there's no like massaging people's egos or we want to hug, and make sure little kids are protected. That's not what's going on. We don't want to get sued and we want to keep people watching our shows. Yeah. And if we feel the cultural tide is turning against a specific word, we're not going to allow that word to be spoken. I mean, that's what's happening. So Karen Kilgarick,
sure.
Hello. Karen has worked with that department for years. She knows what ethics are, right? Now, having said all that, would it occur to her naturally during the course of, when did this happen? This was like 5 years into the program, that the clown morgue story like became an issue? Yeah, it's about 5 years in.
Yeah.
Right? So is that the first time that they've looked at, is it ethical to question? I can't imagine it, right? They've got a team of attorneys. So whatever they're doing, they know is legal because they don't want to get sued. But then is it ethical, right? And so that's where I don't have the answer for this, because it is a campfire story situation. The word got out in town.
From the legal point of view,
that was perfectly legal. The cops screwed up. That was their bad, right? But all right, they told some people, and those other people told some people, and so the person who wrote in was the daughter of one of the cops, so she heard it from her dad. Right. So,
right. But I still think that going back to ethical and not so much legal questions about them taking the words of others and using them as their own and making money off of it, I think that's a problem. So if they're stealing, someone wrote an article for Fortune or something, and then they read off of that, just blatantly read off of it and did credit the journalist, I think that's a problem for the journalist, and they should be more careful. And perhaps they are being more careful to do that now. I don't really hear them crediting a lot of people, though. Maybe in the show notes they do. I don't really know. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't dived into their show notes ever, but I do hear them mentioning writers and heaping praise on publications and writers. Like, oh, this Texas Monthly, they go to a lot for a lot of their stories, and Skip Hollingsworth, I think his name, I'm not sure, like a writer, right? Mention him a lot. So they are being more, and they have been, I think, for a while, more careful about citing. In the early episodes, they'll start the show and Karen will say, oh, last week we didn't credit so-and-so and so-and-so. And I think it was just a case of, hey, let's, like what we did. Hey, let's have a show. Let's put it out there. And then you start thinking about things.
And I try to credit the people whose work I use. So like if I'm going to quote from somebody, I'll say, so-and-so Forbes said blah, blah, blah. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And of course, show notes. And in our earlier episodes, I'm trying to cite everybody all the time. And it got in the way of the show. It got in the way of the flow of the conversation. Right.
Uh-huh.
And so I stopped doing that. And now I just plagiarize left and right. It's gotten a lot easier.
So I don't have any answers about the whole issue of whether or not Karen and Georgia should be telling stories that may not be theirs to tell. I don't really understand. I guess I don't really understand the drama around that, because if I was kidnapped,
I
would think that was a matter of public record that I had been kidnapped, maybe, and that people could talk about it. I might not like it, but I wouldn't like being kidnapped would be the primary problem I would have, not the fact that Karen and Georgia were talking about it on international podcasts.
On an international
podcast.
I think it would
be, of course, it's an international podcast. So I think it would be okay to me for people to tell my story.
So I have a friend who's studying for an exam, and part of the prep work is looking at ethics, right? And he sent me a text with some questions about ethics. He got some answers wrong on the test, and he was like, what would you have said, X, Y, or Z, right? And I said the same things that he said. And he was like, yeah, and they're saying that's wrong. And I'm like, well, clearly this test is wrong, right? And then we got talking about not so much what are ethics, but why are ethics important? And he had some interesting points that really wouldn't have occurred to me, right? That are applicable here. So I beat the drum a lot about legal. Nobody wants to get sued. That's why standards and practices are there, right? One could raise the question, is it ethical to have a department that prevents you from getting sued because you want to keep money, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, no. And so sometimes the law allows what ethics don't. So.
Okay. Yes.
Right. Which was an idea that hadn't occurred to me at all.
Yeah.
Not that I'm some law lover, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this. I do other things. Hard to believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so let's go back to the 1800s and the abolitionist movement, when slavery in this country was enforced by law, and people would break the law to free other human beings from bondage. Right. So cool. That's a case where ethics override what's legal, because you were legally bound to return people, as of course I'm sure you know. Great. And so, okay, that makes sense. Ethics being this guiding light, this higher principle. So let's take a quick look at what are laws, what is morality, what is ethics. I have a one sentence definition for each. So laws are formal rules that govern how we behave, what we must do and not do. They create an enforceable standard of behavior. Laws can be just or unjust. Laws can be silent when morality and ethics are clear, right? And we can look at the Frederick Douglass decision by the Supreme Court in the 1860s, I think. Anyway, 1800s, I can say that pretty safely, where they ruled that he, wasn't a human. Okay, so what is morality? Morality is an informal framework of values, principles, beliefs, ways of living, customs. Morality isn't usually enforced by the state. Examples of morality: Christianity, Buddhism. It provides a set of answers to basic ethical questions. How should I live? What should I do? Right? Morality is inherited from family and culture. Morality can be obeyed without having to think. You already know what to do. You're being habitually virtuous, right? And then ethics is a branch of philosophy that answers the basic question, what should I do? Process of reflection in which people's decisions are shaped by their values, principles, and purpose. Rather than unthinking habits or social conventions, ethics requires some brain power, right? What looks right and meaningful in our lives. Ethical decisions are based on conscious decisions. All right, so cool. So why go into all of that? I guess it's that I'm kind of coming down on the side after having read some definitions where, telling third-hand accounts isn't ethical. Telling third-hand accounts for money and attention, but it is legal.
Yeah, it's legal. I don't think we were questioning whether it's legal. Were we?
No, No, not at all. But
Okay.
yeah, but it is legal. And so it's not really we're at a tipping point in our culture, but our culture's shifting rapidly, right? And for many reasons. And now we have the issues around, we trip over every now and then issues around comedy, right?
Mhm.
Things people have said and, oh, this was okay then, it's not okay now. I'm not even talking about language. I'm just talking about some of our humor in the past 10 years ago. It's pretty mean and vicious. And if you listen to I used to love Joan Rivers. I mean, I still
Right.
do, right? But
Yeah,
her
she
sex
is mean.
are
Just mean.
just bad. Like, I can't listen to them now because they're so
Yeah.
hurtful. And I thought they were hysterical then, right?
Yeah.
And so that might be what happens with My Favorite Murder. Not so much that the show will jump the shark, which in my opinion, it already has when they had that commercial for the hoo-ha.
The hoo-ha?
The hoo-ha? This isn't
What's
a commercial,
the hoo-ha?
everybody. I don't know because I don't have a vagina, but it is something that involves cleaning. And
Really?
I think, or it's pills you
Wow.
take that are supplements that
I don't know.
make you feel erotic or clean and happy. I don't know. Right. And it's,
I missed that commercial, but
oh
you
my
complain
God.
about the number of commercials on My Favorite Murder.
My
just to
favorite
start
commercial
with.
is
Exactly.
really, yeah. But so I can foresee a future where we could look back at My Favorite Murder podcast and be like, God, they really weren't thinking about the victims at all. They were just, they were so empathetic, but so unthoughtful.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if the empathy, it doesn't always come off to me as real. It just kind of comes off as like they're giving lip service to, oh, how terrible, and oh, how awful, and oh, these poor people, the sweet baby angel. It's whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I love the show. I can listen to it hours and hours and hours because I have multiple times,
I have as well.
But let's circle around that idea and go back to 2016 when something sort of similar happened, right?
Okay.
Not quite the same thing. Do you remember the Jennifer Morey story?
No.
She did an I Survived where she told her story. Karen saw that I Survived and it was one of her favorites and she retold it on the show. And Jennifer Morey, who's an attorney in Dallas, and all this is public information.
Yeah.
Meaning, let me rephrase that because lots of things are public information that I shouldn't be sharing publicly.
Right.
But she appeared at a show and spoke live on stage.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I feel comfortable saying she's an attorney. She lives in Dallas because that's what she said.
Yeah.
Right. To 2,000 people plus she knows what the podcast is.
Yeah.
And so she's the woman who moved into an apartment complex that was managed by Pinkerton Security. And Pinkerton was the big famous detective agency in the 1940s, right?
Yeah.
And so Pinkerton Security, one of their agents broke into her house. And then
oh my God.
She fought him off and locked herself in the bathroom and happened to have an old cell phone. And so every old cell phone has enough charge in it and you can call 911 for free from old cell phone, right? On purpose because that's how it is.
Yeah.
And so cool. And she was talking with the dispatcher and she'd been stabbed multiple times. I mean, it was horrific thing that happened, right? And the dispatcher stayed on the line with her. And after she was rescued, the dispatcher came to her wedding.
Wow.
Yeah. They became not great friends, but they became friends. And so that aired in 2016. And I'm going to read something now. It is, the link will be in the show notes because I forgot what article I pulled this from. But shortly after the Jennifer Morey episode aired in 2016, Morey emailed the show. My immediate feeling was horror, Karen Kilgariff recalls. Before I knew anything about what she had written, I was just like, honestly, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. If she was upset, if there was going to be anything bad in that email, that was kind of it for me. But Morey was not upset. She felt affirmed by the way Kilgariff and Hardstark had discussed her story. A year later, Maury came to a My Favorite Murder live show and received a hero's welcome. It was like the Beatles walked out onto the stage, Kilgariff recalls, visibly emotional at the memory. That audience was full of people who knew who she was and what she'd been through, and were just so thrilled to be able to show her how much they cared. Hardstark, too, is tearing up. I'm on a new medication that allows me to cry, she says with glee. So now I'm like, oh, fuck, this is what it feels like to have emotions again. Which, funny, right?
Cute.
And all right, fine. And at the end, Hardstark's sort of general reflections on why true crime, to kind of answer your big question, why true crime? Let's see. I've always felt that the more I learn and the more I read about it, the more I watch, the more I'll be prepared, which I know is 100% not true. But that habit has kept me up nights since I was a child. It seems like a way to have more agency over it. Sorry. The way to have more agency over it is to tell these stories from the place of the person that we identify with the most, which is the victim. It's empowering for them. So I totally see where Georgia and Karen view themselves as doing a service and doing good in the world. And I'm going to say that while I could build a case for, oh, this is unethical and they're in it for the money. And of course they're in it for the money. I mean, that's why they're doing it 5 years later. Can you imagine doing this 5 years from now for free?
For free? Maybe.
Me too.
If we had 35 million listeners, I would do it for free.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. Oh,
no?
my.
Well, but by then we would be making money for sure.
So. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Labor of love, ladies and gentlemen. And
that's right.
Oh, God, I was going to say and everybody in between, which just isn't funny at all, but it sounded funny in my head. So, okay. So how do we rate this apology? Do you have more you disapprove of?
No, that's pretty much everything. This apology, I would rate a 5.
Ah, okay.
It's not terrible because they did apologize and they did throw money at the problem, which is something. I mean, it's not.
It's performative and it does a thing, but yeah, it did feel performative.
But it's better than doing nothing. So I give them 5 points for it. I take away 5 points for all the reasons that I talked about previously. So it's not the worst apology we've had. It's certainly not the best.
I'm going to give them a 6.
Really?
Yep. So 1 plus over, and I'm going to give them a 6 because the victim herself, the woman who wrote into the show, listened to the retelling, listened to her letter being read, listened to the apology, right? And she says basically, okay, she didn't even say basically, this is what she's saying on Reddit.
Yeah. Okay,
I'm not even really sure to where to begin. Today's been a pretty emotional day. Hearing Karen's voice catch was pretty emotional. I had no idea about the donation to RAIN, but I am incredibly grateful that others will benefit from it. I have no hard feelings towards the original storyteller. I think we've all been young and excited. At one point, the original teller has my email if they want to write out. And sort of in the final analysis, she says, thank you to everyone who helped me connect to the MFM team. And she says the MFM team was respectful of her privacy, and she would ask the same of everyone who hears her story basically in the future. So she's accepted what's happened. So 1 plus, but I mean, I agree in terms of what I might expect from Karen, who's I view as a naturally gifted storyteller and somebody who has a lot of empathy. I would expect it maybe a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. They could have thought of this before they read the story out. So yeah, it was not a great apology. Not the worst.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. Right. And so there we go. And I guess we're going to not cancel My Favorite Murder, and we're going to allow them to continue to broadcast.
Yes. Yes.
Chrissy Teigen, another thing. Sorry, Chris.
Chrissy's been canceled by us.
Yeah, she's She's doing we'll come back to Chrissy Teigen, I am sure, because she's going to fuck up again and need to apologize. But even beyond that, she's doing the PR game. She's going to lay low for a while and then she's going to come back with
I see.
a thing. Who knows?
I haven't seen her tweet for a while, but I don't get all of her tweets.
She's not, yeah. Her publicist is like tied her hands.
Shut up, Chrissy. All right. Do we have a Who's Sorry Now? I don't.
I do. And I have one that's related.
Good.
Yes. Oh, good.
Good.
No, I should never be sorry, but I am.
I tried to think of one, but I couldn't. So I'll let you tell a Who's Sorry Now.
Okay, cool. So I am sorry because I'm going to keep this real vague. I'm sorry because I have a friend, the end. I have a friend who was placed on the ISIS kill list.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. And found out because the FBI contacted them and said, hey, listen, you're on this list and, your risk assessment is it's not immediate, but you just need to be aware. Right. So cool. So there was a lot happened out of that. We had a party and my friend was there and I told some people that my friend was on the ISIS kill list because it's the most exciting thing that had happened around me in a long time. And I will say that their dating companion, going to keep this as gender neutral as possible.
Yeah. Found
out because, of course, my friend told their dating companion, partner, right?
Sure.
Hey, I'm on the ISIS kill list. And the partner said, well, what about me? Right? Which they then broke up shortly afterwards because the concern was not for the person on the list.
The other person.
The concern was for the self, right?
Oh, no.
If I'm with you and they drive by and shoot you, am I going to be able to duck fast enough? Like, can I be seated facing windows from now on? Yeah. So
you were responsible for the breakup.
I'm responsible for everybody's break. No, but so I told a bunch of people and then my friend approached me the next day and said, hey, could you shut your fucking mouth? Because I had people come up to me and ask me questions about it. I don't want to be talking about it. I don't want people to know. I don't want it to be a thing. And am I sharing it on a podcast? Yes. Why?
But you're not giving names out, so it's okay.
It's getting me the attention that I crave.
So you're sorry that you did that?
I'm sorry, but you can't give me a good story and then not let me tell it. So no, they need to be sorry to me.
That's right. For not letting you tell that story.
Exactly. So yeah. Yep.
Wow. I don't know who that was. So you didn't tell me, which is good.
Oh, I'll totally tell you because amazing things came out of it. They hired a private security firm to train them in the art of self-defense. And that went on for a couple of years. And cool, the things I learned, right? And I will say that my friend who is wonderful and sweet will poke your fucking eye out if you come for them, right?
Wow.
And the big one was like, if you're in a shopping mall and there's a shooter and there are shooters on the second floor, sort of you're in an open atrium, right?
Go out the back.
Who?
Go out the back of the store.
Have I told you that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I used to work in a mall.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, that's exactly what you do. Most people will be like, oh, drop and play dead or hide behind a plant or whatever. Run into a store. Every store in a mall has a back door that leads to a loading dock.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not the main entrance or exit, so you probably won't be caught there. So it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. You're welcome, America.
Thank you.
And I guess the rest of the world, because there are active shooters now in other countries.
And this is an international podcast.
It is an international podcast. And I'm going to say a special hello to our one listener in Latvia. Hi.
Yay. Hi, Latvia. We love you.
We don't know where you are, but...
Let us know your address and we'll come visit you.
And have you listened to My Favorite Murder?
Yeah, tell us how you feel, all your thoughts about My Favorite Murder. Okay, I think that's it for this week.
That is more than it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We had a great time, as always. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I guess that's it.
Yeah. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Apologies Accepted, the podcast.
You can find links to the articles and the sources in the show notes.
To submit an apology or find out more, visit us at apologiesaccepted.net, where you can also find our merchandise.
We're on Twitter at Apologies Accepted.
And on Instagram at apologies.accepted.
You can support our important work at Patreon.com/Apologies Accepted.
And fuck Facebook.
Bye.
Bye.